3 nights, 4 days, nearly 1,000 kilometers from the front line. And Russia could not stop a single one of them. What Ukraine just pulled off is the kind of operation that military planners spend careers theorizing about and rarely ever see executed in reality. Not once, not twice, 3 times in 4 days, Ukrainian drones traveled hundreds of miles through the airspace of one of the most heavily militarized nations on Earth, slipped past radar arrays, evaded air defense batteries, and hit targets so deep inside Russian territory that Moscow had convinced itself they were simply unreachable. And when the smoke finally cleared, Russia did not issue an apology. It did not acknowledge failure. It did something far more revealing. It blamed Poland. That single detail tells you everything you need to know about where this war actually stands right now. Because when a nuclear-armed nation with one of the largest military budgets on the planet responds to a successful enemy strike by pointing the finger at a neighboring country with zero evidence, it is not making a strategic argument. It is admitting defeat. It is telling the world that it has no explanation for what just happened, no answer for how it happened, and no credible plan to stop it from happening again. And it is doing all of this while 3 of its most important pieces of economic infrastructure are still smoldering. Stay with us, because by the time we are done, you will understand exactly why what Ukraine just did does not just change this war. It changes the entire strategic calculus of how modern conflicts are fought, and why Vladimir Putin may have just watched the beginning of the end of his ability to fund this war at all. To understand the full weight of what happened, you need to understand what Russia's oil infrastructure actually is. Not in abstract economic terms, in concrete, brutal dollars and barrels terms. Russia does not fight this war on ideology. It fights it on petrodollars. Every missile fired at a Ukrainian city, every drone launched into Ukrainian airspace, every salary paid to every soldier sent to die in Ukrainian mud, all of it is paid for by oil, specifically by the oil that flows out of ports on the Baltic Sea in the Leningrad region, hundreds of miles from any active front line. Ports that Russia has spent years fortifying, protecting, and surrounding with air defense systems precisely because it knows that without them, the money stops. And when the money stops, the war stops. This is not a peripheral concern for the Kremlin. This is the central nervous system of its entire war economy. The port of Primorsk alone processed almost 17 million tons of petroleum products in a single year. 17 million tons. It is the endpoint of the Baltic pipeline system, capable of pushing through 1 million barrels of oil every single day. It is home to 18 massive storage reservoirs. It is the primary docking hub for Russia's shadow fleet, the network of privately owned tankers that carry sanctioned Russian oil around the world in defiance of international law, generating billions in revenue that flows directly into the Kremlin's war chest. Ust-Luga, the second major port in the same region, processed almost 33 million tons of cargo in 2025. 33 million. It also handles natural gas, produces liquefied petroleum gas, and operates infrastructure belonging to some of Russia's largest energy companies. And the Kyiv refinery, also in the Leningrad region, processes up to 20 million tons of oil every single year, making it the second largest refinery in the entire country. Together, these 3 facilities represent an irreplaceable pillar of Russia's ability to generate the revenue it means to keep fighting. Ukraine just hit all 3 of them in 4 days. Military strategists call what Russia has been doing to Ukraine for the past 4 years the economics of exhaustion. The principle is straightforward and brutal. You flood the battlefield with cheap weapons and force your opponent to burn through expensive ones defending against them. Russia's Shahed-type drones cost roughly $35,000 each to produce. The Western air defense missiles Ukraine has been using to shoot them down cost millions per shot, sometimes more. The math is catastrophic. For every drone Russia sends, Ukraine bleeds 10 times, 50 times, 100 times the cost just to survive the night. It is not a military strategy in the traditional sense. Keep the pressure up long enough, drain the opponent's treasury deep enough, and eventually the weapons stop coming, the defenses collapse, and the war ends on your terms. For years, Ukraine had no answer to it. Until now. On the night of March 23rd, Ukrainian drones struck the port of Primorsk. Not a handful of drones, dozens of them, traveling hundreds of miles through Russian airspace, crossing region after region, evading radar system after radar system, bypassing every layer of air defense the Kremlin had placed between its border and its most valuable infrastructure. Local residents heard the explosions ripple across the night. Fires broke out across the site. When satellite imagery came in the following day, the scale of what had happened became impossible to minimize. 8 tankers damaged, fires burning for days, firefighting crews working around the clock to contain an inferno that stretched across one of the most strategically important port facilities in all of Russia. Russia's air defenses shot down more than 50 Ukrainian drones that night. 50. And it still was not enough. 2 days later, on March 25th, the drones came back. This time, the target was Bust-Luga, also in the Leningrad region, also hundreds of miles from Ukraine's border. Residents reported 10 separate explosions thundering across the area. 3 oil tankers were struck. Fuel storage facilities caught fire. 3 berths were knocked out of operation. Infrastructure belonging to one of Russia's largest energy firms was hit. The entire terminal was shut down and remained offline for days. When it finally began resuming operations, it was running nowhere near its maximum capacity, and engineers estimated it would take weeks of repairs before anything approaching normal throughput could be restored. In ports that process tens of millions of tons of cargo per year, every single day offline is an economic catastrophe measured in the tens of millions of dollars. 2 strikes, 2 successes, hundreds of miles inside Russia, and the Kremlin had nothing to show for it except burning infrastructure and a regional governor who had run out of ways to downplay the damage. And then Ukraine hit again. Overnight on March 26th, more than 20 Ukrainian drones reached the Kiev refinery in the Leningrad region, the second largest refinery in Russia, a facility that produces not just fuel, but petrochemicals sold to nations around the world, generating foreign currency that feeds directly into Russia's military budget. The drones hit. Critical infrastructure was struck. Fires broke out across the site. Thick columns of black smoke rose above the refinery and were visible for miles. Satellite imagery confirmed what Russia tried to conceal. The refinery was burning 4 days, every single one of them a success, on targets that Russia had built its entire air defense architecture to protect. This is the moment the Kremlin's self-image collides with reality, and the collision is not pretty. Russia has told its own people for decades that its territory is impenetrable, that its air defense systems are the finest ever built, that no enemy could reach deep into the Russian heartland and survive the attempt. That story has been one of the foundational pillars of Putin's domestic legitimacy. The idea that whatever happens at the front, the homeland is safe, the ports are safe, the refineries are safe, the infrastructure that pays for everything is safe. Ukraine just burned that story to the ground 3 times, and Russia's response confirmed the depth of the crisis more than any satellite image ever could. Official Russian sources claimed that Ukraine's drones could not have flown through Russian airspace undetected. Therefore, they argued, the drones must have taken an alternate route, through Poland, north through Lithuania, across Latvia and Estonia, along the Gulf of Finland, all of it through NATO airspace, with the secret cooperation of alliance members. Think about what that claim requires you to believe. It requires you to believe that multiple NATO member states secretly coordinated with Ukraine to allow attack drones to transit their sovereign airspace without any public acknowledgement, without any of the thousands of civilian radar systems, flight tracking networks, or open-source monitors detecting a single one of them, and without a single leak from any government, military, or intelligence apparatus across 4 separate allied nations. All of this in complete secrecy with zero evidence. That is not an intelligence assessment. That is desperation wearing a uniform. Open-source analysts dismantled the claim within hours. It was sitting in plain sight, in Russia's own data. Air alerts in Russia do not trigger randomly. They trigger when drones are detected crossing into a new region. On each of the 3 nights in question, air alerts fired in sequence, region by region, from Ukraine's border all the way to the Leningrad region. Bryansk, Smolensk, oblast after oblast, lighting up in sequence, tracing the exact path the drones took through Russian territory. Russia's own Ministry of Defense confirmed shooting down dozens of drones on each of those nights. On March 23rd, more than 50 intercepted. On March 25th, 33 more. On March 26th, 21 additional. If those drones were transiting NATO airspace, why was Russia shooting them down over Russian regions? The answer is, they were not in NATO airspace. They were in Russia the whole time, and Russia's defenses destroyed a fraction of them and still could not prevent 3 consecutive strikes on its most valuable infrastructure. Latvia's Ministry of Defense issued a direct response to Moscow's accusations. The message was clear and unambiguous. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia had no involvement in Ukraine's operations whatsoever. And Russia, by making the claim, was demonstrating its own weakness, trying to distract the world from the fact that it cannot defend its own coastline. It cannot defend its own coastline. Let that land for a moment. The country that invaded Ukraine, confident the war would last days. The country that has spent 4 years insisting it is the dominant military force in the conflict. The country whose propagandists told its citizens that the homeland was untouchable. That country cannot stop Ukrainian drones from reaching oil ports on the Baltic Sea. And when those drones arrive and those ports start burning, the best response Moscow can produce is to blame Poland. The economic consequences of these strikes are not theoretical. They are already being measured in lost barrels and frozen shipments and halted operations and repair bills that Russia can barely afford. Both Primorsk and Ust-Luga were forced to cease operations in the immediate aftermath of the strikes. No tankers in, no tankers out, no oil moving, just fire and smoke and the sound of firefighting crews trying to contain damage that should never have been allowed to happen. Even after partial operations resumed, both facilities were running well below capacity. Every barrel not exported is money that does not reach the Kremlin. Every day of downtime is a gap in the revenue stream that funds the entire war effort. And Russia's revenue stream was already under enormous pressure before a single drone ever reached Primorsk. On March 30th, Ukraine struck again. A major chemical plant in the Samara region, thousands of kilometers from the Leningrad strikes, hit by drones that once again penetrated Russian air defenses. The same night, a large-scale fire broke out at a metallurgical plant in occupied Luhansk that Russia had converted from civilian production into a military manufacturing hub. Strike after strike, night after night, Russia's defense is failing each time. This is the strategic inversion that Putin never prepared for. He built his entire war around the economics of exhaustion, the idea that Russia could bleed Ukraine dry faster than Ukraine could bleed Russia. What Ukraine has done is turn that logic against him. Every strike on Russian oil infrastructure transfers the economic pain from Kyiv to Moscow. Every day a port sits idle is a day Russia's war budget shrinks. Every refinery that needs weeks of repairs is weeks of reduced exports, reduced revenue, reduced capacity to sustain the military machine. Ukraine has found the pressure point that Russia spent years trying to hide behind air defense batteries and propaganda, and it is pressing it harder with every passing week. Putin walked into this war believing he was attacking a weaker nation that would collapse under the weight of Russian military power. What he created instead was a nation that learned to fight smarter, strike harder, and reach deeper than anyone thought possible. A nation that can now hit targets nearly 1,000 kilometers from its own border. A nation whose drone operators are lighting fires in the same region as Russia's second-largest city. A nation that is dismantling the financial engine of the Kremlin's war machine, one burning oil tank at a time. 3 strikes, 4 days, and Russia blamed Poland. Every tanker burning in Primorsk is a message. Every day Ust-Luga sits idle is a signal. And every time Moscow points the finger at Latvia, instead of explaining how Ukrainian drones crossed hundreds of miles of Russian airspace undetected, the world understands a little more clearly which side of this war has run out of answers. If you found value in this, subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next.